All right, thanks, Jess, and thanks, Cinderise, and thank you for everybody taking the time out of your day to listen to me speak. I'm no one special, but hopefully I can at least provide you some good information about SBA's new COVID-19 small business relief program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So let me just pull up my screen here, and then we will get started. So hopefully everybody can see the large SBA symbol on my end. I'm just going to minimize my video on the side just because it pops up on my end. It blocks some of the words here. But yeah, so we're going to go over the newest program, which is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So this came about, as of the American Aid Act that was signed off on March 11th of 2021. So what you're going to see here is this program is going to be designed for folks that such as restaurants that serve the public and patrons on site. There are going to be different entities that can be eligible if they serve a certain percentage of or have their gross receipts can show that they service on-site patrons, but predominantly it's going to be restaurants, breweries, ice cream shops, things like that, that can utilize, grant funding under this program. And this is a grant. This is not a loan such as the economic injury disaster loan. So this is, a grant funds, and it's going to be on a first come, first serve basis. So we'll go over what RRF is, the eligibility, the priority groups, what documents you may need, and then also how you can utilize the funds. So when it comes to this fund, like I said, it was established back in mid-March. There's $28.6 billion appropriated for this particular award funding program. Now, keep in mind, I know compared to some of our other programs that we've had over the course of this, last year during the pandemic, that may not seem like a lot of funds. But when you look at the different programs and what Congress has done, if we see a need and this program has success and it's helping the community that's it's intended to serve, you may see Congress rehash things later on, maybe a few months down the road, and appropriate more funds. It's not a guarantee, but I just want to make sure that folks understand, even though there may not be as much funding available, don't be discouraged from applying, because things could always change in the future, as it has with, say, the Paycheck Protection Program or our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which have both had additional funding over the course of the year allocated to it. So as far as the deadline when it comes to applications, there is no set deadline. So it's just gonna, the applications are gonna be taken in by the SBA up until the funds are completely exhausted. So, just keep that in mind. And another good thing with this program, the folks who are awarded funds will have an extended period of time to use this on eligible expenses. So as you can see here on this slide, the applicant will have up to March 11th of 2023 to utilize these funds. That's, vastly different from, say, the Paycheck Protection Program, which, the maximum time frame an applicant could use the funds was over a 24-week period after they've had the funds dispersed to them. So, they have a much greater time to utilize the funds. And then when it comes to the amount of funding an entity can receive, so the SBA will provide funding up to $5 million per location, but it's not going to exceed $10 million in total for any affiliated businesses across the board. So it's all going to come down on depending on what calculation they utilize and how much funding is shown after that particular calculation. I'll go over that in this presentation. There's a variety of different calculations. Typically what drives that is when your entity started operations. So I'll explain more in the upcoming slides. And with the minimum award, so anybody that does their particular calculation out, If you receive a figure of less than $1,000, that applicant will not be eligible because the minimum award will be $1,000 under this particular program. So let's get on to eligibility. So what are some types of organizations that are eligible? So that, as far as, how you file your taxes or how your business is established and organized. So you can see the majority of for-profit entities will be eligible under this program. So you have your C Corps, your S Corps, your partnerships, your limited liability companies, sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, independent contractors, tribal businesses, LLCs, taxed as S Corps, or sole prop. So, the one thing you want to keep in mind with this program, nonprofits are not eligible. However, there's a little caveat to that. So if you have a nonprofit that will be consider, maybe they run a restaurant out of their location, and their restaurant has their own separate EIN and they're considered their own entity, and they're organized under one of these organizational types, that particular component could be eligible for the program. So additionally, what types of actual entities will be eligible under this program? So obviously, it's called the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So restaurants, number one, would be eligible under this program. And then you have your food stands, your food trucks, food carts, caterers. You have also bars and saloons, and lounges, taverns. You also have your snack and non-alcoholic beverage bars. So that's, we're considering that to be like coffee shops or ice cream shops. You have licensed facilities or premises of beverage alcohol producers where the public may taste, sample, or produce or purchase products. So think, breweries, things like that. Other similar places of business in which the public or patrons assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. So when it comes to select certain types of entities, as you see on the right-hand part of this slide, the entities below must have an on-site sales of food or beverage to the public that comprise of at least 33% of gross receipts. So that's going to include your bakeries. That's going to include your breweries and your microbreweries, your wineries and your distilleries, and also inns could potentially be eligible, as long as they show that 33% of gross receipts of sales of food and beverage to the public. Now, keep in mind, where this particular fund is not for, your wholesale bakery, that strictly does that, but again, if they have on-site sales, as long as they can show that 33%, they are eligible. And when we're talking about on-site sales, it's not necessarily, strictly, okay, they have to come in, they have to sit down for a given period of time. They can, on-site sales, the definition in our program guide, states that they can order online, they can pick up to go. So there's a variety of things that entails in that on-site, not necessarily just everybody that comes in has to technically sit and have a meal or have a drink. They can pick up their things and get it to go. So who's not eligible? So you have your state or local government operated businesses. They won't be eligible under this program. Also, as of March 13th of 2020, owns or operates entities that owns or operates together with any affiliated businesses more than 20 locations, regardless of whether those locations do business under the same or different names or in different industries. So they're really trying to target, the smaller small businesses in this sense for this program. So if you have your larger entities that have more than 20 locations with their affiliates, they're not going to be eligible for this particular program. Also too, if you have a pending application for or have received a shuttered venue operator grant, so that's one thing you may see that certain entities may be eligible depending on their operation situation. They may be eligible to apply for both that SVOG, that Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program, or this particular program. They're going to have to make a business decision and apply for the one that best suits their needs. They cannot apply for both. And also too, publicly traded companies are not eligible. Any entity that is permanently closed, and what we mean by permanently closed is means you turned in your keys, you're no longer accepting, patrons, you've completely, shut down operations. If you had to temporarily shut down at any point in time of the year because of, COVID restrictions or health restrictions, or maybe there was a COVID outbreak at your location, that doesn't count as a permanent shutdown. Maybe you're a seasonal business and you don't typically operate during a given time of year. So, if you're down, I'm here in Massachusetts, down in the Cape Cod area, a lot of small businesses only operate from, May to October. If you're not operating over the winter time, that's fine. You're not considered permanently closed. That's your normal business cycle. um, and then if you're a nonprofit organization, and then anybody that has funding after they've done their calculation of less than $1,000, will not be eligible as well. So as far as, when it comes to bankruptcy, you could potentially be eligible depending on the situation that you're in with the bankruptcy. So you have on the left-hand side in green, what would be considered eligible is, if you are operating under an approved plan of reorganization under either a Chapter 11, a Chapter 12, or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and you meet all program requirements, then you are eligible. If you've temporarily closed your doors due to state or local restrictions or other pandemic causes, but are still in operation or have reopened, you are eligible, as I explained earlier. When you're not eligible is if you've permanently closed, if you filed a Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy, or you filed for either a Chapter 7, 11, 12, or 13 bankruptcy, but you are not under an approved plan of reorganization. So that's, key in this situation, is having that approved plan already in place. So when it comes to franchises can be eligible for this as well. So you might have, you might own a local Subway or Domino's or whatever the case may be. So you can be eligible for this program. So any business that's a franchise that meets all other program requirements is eligible. The franchise must be listed on SBA's franchise directory, so you can look up your company when you're in the portal applying. So the directory itself has about 4,000. The SBA's directory has about 4,000 some odd franchises already listed in there, so we don't foresee too much of a problem with this. But in your case, you'll be prompted. If you state that you're a franchise, you'll be prompted to look that up during the application period. If you find that your franchise is not on that directory, um, you'll need to get added. Your franchise will need to get added. So there will be additional documentation, franchise agreements that will be need to send to franchise@sba.gov. So keep in mind, you might need to discuss that with your franchisor to get that ball rolling and get yourself added. So cross-program eligibility. So this is just a good outline here on this slide to kind of show, what how the different programs that are currently out there affect an RRF recipient. So for the Paycheck Protection Program applicant, so any PPP loans received by the RRF applicant will affect the applicant's funding calculation. So we'll go over that shortly. And then for shuttered venue operator grant applicant, entities that have a pending application for or received an RRF are not eligible to apply for the shuttered venue operator grant. So it's one or the other. Okay. And then for COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan applicants, you may apply for the EIDL and an RRF. So there's no, crossover that will have any effect on your business entity if you apply for both, because the EIDL is a loan, so you are eligible. So it's not a grant program. And then the one thing you want to make sure is that for the RRF, the same business cannot apply for an RRF more than one time. So, make sure that once you submit your application, don't try to submit a second application. The system should pick up on the EIN that's already in file, and the review teams for this program will get through yours on a first come first serve basis during the priority period. So also too, compared to say the shuttered venue operator grant program that some of you may be aware of, there was requirements to also register on sam.gov. So this is very common if you're doing business with the government, say with one of our government contracting programs. And it also did require you to provide a DUNS number and a cage identifier. With the RRF, none of that is needed. So it's really just establishing, registering yourself under the RRF application portal, to establish a username and password, and then getting right into the application itself. And then also valid unexpired ITINs are acceptable. If you need more information on ITINs, if that is something that that you actually have for your business entity, you want to refer to irs.gov for that information. So what happens if a PPP loan, if you have a PPP loan or a SBO grant? So let me just, make sure we have all the bullets up here. So for PPP funds, they're going to be subtracted from your final funding amount. Also, too, you're going to be verified based on the EIN, the ITIN, or the SSN associated with your PPP loan. So you want to make sure that, if you applied for a PPP loan under, a given EIN for your entity, you want to keep that the same during your application process for this particular program, because the system's going to match up, what funding you've received under that Paycheck Protection Program. And then also too, if you've applied for PPP loans using different EINs, you must provide all those EINs that you utilize. So the application, again, will allow you to enter in additional EINs if that was the case. Because with the Paycheck Protection Program, over the course of the last year, the system's changed of how the lenders, our lending partners, had to have inputted information. So maybe you got a first draw PPP loan back in April of 2020 when the program first kicked off. The way they inputted information was a little bit different than, say, if you received a PPP loan in 2021 with a total different portal access. So some folks may have used incorrect EINs, or used an EIN that was from the parent company, but they really needed to use it from the subsidiary. If that was the case, just make sure that you detail that in the application itself. Then when you apply for the RRF, you must withdraw any outstanding PPP applications. So keep in mind, just recently, within the last 48 hours, the PPP program has exhausted all of its funds. There was some set asides for certain lending institutions that are considered CDFIs that can still take in applications. Here in Massachusetts, I know we have a few folks that are outside of Massachusetts. We only have a few that are considered actual CDFIs. So if you had a current application that was maybe in pending status, or maybe it was under review because it had a hold code or something like that, your PPP loan could still potentially get funded, because there was, again, set asides for loans that were still in the queue. However, you have to make that decision. If that wasn't finally approved, you should, at this point, probably contact your lender and have them remove that if you're applying for the RRF. Also, another thing when it comes to the PPP loan, you may have had your loan recently approved, but maybe the lender you're working with hasn't dispersed the funds to you yet. That is fine in this situation. You do not have to have that PPP loan canceled. You just need to ask your lender what the actual amount was, as long as it was approved, because the lenders themselves actually have about 10 days, some take a little bit longer, to send those funds to you, but the funds were already allocated if it was approved. And then for the SVOG, again, you can't have a pending application for or have received an SVO grant. So next, we're going to talk about the priority groups, because with this particular program, there's during the first 21 days of intakes of applications, the SBA is going to solely focus on the approvals and the reviews of particular priority groups. So we're going to go over this in the next few slides. So like I said, during the first 21 days, so the application period started on this past Monday at noon. So only applications from businesses owned by women, veterans, and socially and economically disadvantaged applicants will be funded during this period. However, I just want to keep in mind, whether you fit into a priority group or not, you should be applying for this grant program if this is something that fits your needs. It's not that you have to wait those 21 days to apply. You can still apply, but the SBA is going to push applicants under these priority groups ahead, as far as funding goes during that time frame. So then on day 22, all eligible applications will be processed and funded until the program funds are exhausted. So priority group definition. So what I'm going to give you here on the slides is the basic definitions for the actual priority groups. There is an FAQ section for the RRF program on SBA's website. In that section discusses in further detail definitions and of the priority groups in itself, and it also provides links to the Code of Federal Regulation to break it down even further. But here's a basic rundown of it on these next few slides. So you have a business concern that is at least 51% owned, and the management and daily business operations of the applicant are controlled by one or more individuals who are women, veterans, socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. When it comes to the application, applicants must self-certify on the application that they meet the eligibility requirements. So when it comes to that, the application is not going to ask for any supporting documentation on that. However, keep in mind that the SBA is going to try to uphold the utmost integrity with this program, and they do reserve the right to randomly audit awarded applicants at any point in time. So, you may be asked to supply information that supports you identifying as a priority group at a later point in time. Just as a quick example, when it comes to the priority group, like I just stated, you needed to have at least 51% that owns, manages, and operates the business that fall into these categories. So let's just say you had, 5 principal owners, they all own 20%. If 2 of them were veterans and one of them is a woman business principal, you'll meet that definition. So you can combine, your ownership to meet that 51% or more threshold. It does not have to be a single individual. So additionally, some definitions on the socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So socially disadvantaged individuals are those who have been subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice or cultural bias because of their identity as a member of a group without regard to their individual qualities. Also, economically disadvantaged individuals are those socially disadvantaged individuals whose ability to compete in the free enterprise system has been impaired due to diminished capital and credit opportunities as compared to others in the same business area who are not socially disadvantaged. So one thing that you want to just keep in mind when it comes to this program, like I said, you're self-certifying. So we're going on the honesty policy here, right? So no, this isn't, there's no certification program required, when you're doing this application. However, again, if the SBA finds that your business entity recently reorganized your business for the sole purpose of making sure that you fall within those priority groups, that's automatically going to disqualify you for funding for this program. So we're going to get into some scenarios as far as how much you may be able to apply for. So again, typically what's going to drive the formula and the calculation that you're going to use, it's when did you start your operation. So what what I mean by that, and what the definition for when you started your operations under this program is when you had your first sale to a patron or to a customer. That's when what this program dictates is when you started your operation. So it's not when you got you established your tax ID for your business entity. It's not when maybe you established your business with the Secretary of State. Things like that. It's when you had your first sale to your customer or a patron. So if you're an operation for an operation prior to or on January 1st of 2019, you're going to use this formula. Hold on, we got little, you know, um, different things that pop up here. So I just want to make sure it's all here. So what you're going to do for the calculation under this scenario is you're going to take your 2019 gross receipts, then you're going to minus out your 2020 gross receipts. And then you got to minus out those PPP loan amounts. And that's where you'll get your total funding amount. So with this program, it's going to be pretty cut and dry as far as, okay, this is what the calculation states you get. There's not going to be any sort of negotiation on SBA's part or the applicant's part to that particular, once you figure out what your calculation should be. So if you're based on this calculation, if you are going to be awarded $100,000 and your application was approved and there was still funding in the pot, the SBA is going to give you the $100,000. They're not going to call you and say, hey, can we give you $50,000 instead? They're going to give you whatever is whatever it shows based on the calculation, as long as funds are still available and allocated. With that said, same goes the other way around. So you as the applicant, show that you can receive $100,000, but maybe you're looking for more. You can't ask the SBA for more than what the calculation dictates. So the next scenario would be calculation number 2. So this is going to be for anybody that began their operation partially through 2019. So one thing I want to note is that you'll be able to use this calculation, or in the next scenario will be calculation 3. If you fall under this calculation 2, you may be able to utilize calculation 3. But as I'll explain coming up, you may run into longer processing times because there's going to be more paperwork that you're going to need to provide the SBA's review team. So I'll explain that in a second. But for this calculation, what you're going to do is you're going to take the average 2019 monthly gross receipts, then you'll times it by 12 to get your yearly figure for 2019. And then you'll do the same thing as in calculation 1. You'll minus out your 2020 gross receipts, and you'll minus out your PPP loan amounts to get your total funding amount. So keep in mind, when it comes to the PPP funds you received, whether you're minusing those funds out, whether you have received full forgiveness on your first or second draw or both, whether you have not received any forgiveness or partial forgiveness, or even if you haven't spent all the funds yet on those PPP funds, you have to minus out any funding you got under the PPP program. So just as a quick example too, for folks that may fall into this category, let's say you got your first sale October 1st. So that's when you started your operation. You had 3 full months of operation in 2019. So let's say your for simple math, your gross receipts at the end of 2019 said $30,000. All you'll do is first make sure you divide that by 3, and then times it by 12 and do the rest of the calculation. Also for this program, they want you to prorate how many months you divide it by based on when you actually started operations in a given month. So let's say you didn't start on October 1st. Let's say you started on October 15th. So halfway through the month, you'll take your year-end gross receipt figure, and then divide it by 2.5 or 2.5, as opposed to 3, because you were only in operation for 2.5 months. So they do want you to prorate that when you're doing the math out. So the next scenario would be calculation 3. So this is going to be for entities that began operations on or between January 1st of 2020 and March 10th of 2021, and those entities that have not yet opened but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. They can use this calculation below. So, keep in mind, that's a big deal. I think, that's an important aspect of this particular program, because this opens the door up for a lot of these eligible entities that I discussed earlier to get some sort of grant funding, if they can, get an application in and approved. Unlike, say, that the Paycheck Protection Program, you had to have been in operation and, providing payroll as of February 15th of 2020 to be eligible to apply for that particular program. With this, you can, you may not even have your operation started. Yet, but you can, enter in eligible expenses into a calculation to potentially receive some funding. So what you'll do here is you're going to add eligible expenses from February 15th of 2020 all the way through March 11th, 2021. And then you're going to minus out 2020 gross receipts if applicable, and then minus out 2021 gross receipts through March 11th, 2021, if applicable. And then again, if you did receive PPP loans, because again, for most folks, that may fall into calculation 2, you can use this calculation as well. You want to minus out those PPP amounts. That's where you'll get your total amount. So keep in mind, this is why this scenario will take the longest for the SBA to review, because depending on how many expenses you add to this calculation, you're going to need to provide supporting documentation for those expenses. So, you might ask, well, Dan, what are eligible expenses? And we will go over that in this presentation. So the eligible expenses that are applicable for the use of funds for this program are going to be the same eligible expenses for this calculation. Okay, so there's a variety of things like payroll you can add in there. You can business debt. So maybe you have a small business loan. Maybe you've incurred expenses for outdoor seating because you've had to expand due to health and expand your seating due to the health and safety restrictions in your given town or city or state. Those things can be added into this particular calculation. You just want to make sure that you have documentation that supports that. So for like payroll, you may need things like 941s. If you had to expand your seating for health and safety restrictions, you'll have to provide invoices and payments that you made. If you've adding in business debt, you'll have to provide, a lender loan statement, things like that. So there's a fourth scenario, and this is going to depend on if you're an entity that operates multiple locations. You can use different calculations, based on your multiple locations. So what you can do is you may calculate funding amounts for your locations using separate calculation methods, and then aggregate the amounts together. So the aggregate funding is limited to 5 million per location and 10 million for the applicant and its affiliates. So, that's gonna, come down to if you operate multiple businesses with different EINs, maybe they all started their operations at different times. So, the calculation 1 that I discussed would work for maybe 2 of them, but calculation 2, because you started operations partially through 2019, would work for maybe the other entities. So, just keep in mind, you'll have to aggregate them together, but you can, separate the calculations based on when your operation has started. So as far as 2020 gross receipts go, there's going to be several things that you can exclude from the 2020 gross receipts when you're doing the calculation. And what you're going to see here is it's basically the majority of it's like grant funding and any funding under the CARES Act. So you're going to exclude first draw PPP loans and second draw PPP loans if received it in 2020 or 2021, because that's already being factored into the calculation. And then if you're an SBA, if you have an SBA loan currently, maybe you worked with one of our lending partners in the past and you got a line of credit, or you got a loan to open your business, whatever the case may be. Maybe they did it under an SBA loan program. You probably are familiar with the CARES Act, the Section 1112 payments that the SBA has provided over the course of 2020 and 2021, of principal and interest payments that they've picked up due to the CARES Act. Um, those payments you can exclude from your 2020 gross receipts. Also, too, the SBA's economic injury disaster loan, or any idle advance, or some people call it the idle grant. It's the same thing. The targeted idle advance or any other grant funds received via the CARES Act, exclude it from your gross receipts. Also, too, at a more local level. So if you received any state or local business grant funding, so I know that's different across the board depending on what state you're in, or depending on what town or city your business operates in, but you may have received some funding there, exclude that from your 2020 gross receipts. And then lastly, if you received any sort of funding under the Randolph-Shepard Act, financial relief and restoration payments appropriation. I know that's kind of a mouthful, so they call it the FRRP. That's one thing with the government. You're going to see more and more, acronyms, because it's, and everything's becoming alphabet soup because there's so many different programs and services being offered during, the COVID-19, pandemic era. So let's move on to applying and discussing some of the documents that may be needed, that will go along with your application. So first, how do you apply? Okay, so predominantly most folks should be applying online, one way or the other. We're not anticipating too many folks to use the third option that you see here on the slide, which is you can apply by phone, but that is an option. But one of the main ways you can apply is directly through the SBA platform, so at restaurants.sba.gov. So if you're familiar with, say, the Paycheck Protection Program, you applied through a lending partner, whether it was an online lending partner or your local banking institution, this program is predominantly going to be done directly through the SBA. So the SBA is going to be handling this funding program directly. Also, there are a few point of sale vendors that are partnered up with this program with the SBA. So Toast and Square are the only two point of sale vendors that I know of that actually have the applications available on their own portals. So if you're a client of Toast or Square, you want to connect with them. I'm sure that they've probably done some outreach on their end to their clients to let them know that you can also apply through their platforms, and they'll be able to provide supporting documentation for your application as well. And then again, lastly, you can call the RRF hotline, which is 844-279-8898. And you can speak to someone that can help you do the application directly over the phone. However, just anticipate longer processing times, maybe longer wait times when you're calling that number, because that is a general hotline that's used for a variety of different things for this program. So if someone needs technical assistance with their application online, maybe they're running into some sort of glitch, they call that hotline. Or maybe they need to make a correction to their application online, you would call that number. Or you just have a general question about an eligibility issue, all of that number is used for all of those purposes. So what documents will you need in order to apply? So everybody across the board is going to need to submit a SBA Form 3172. So that's the application for this program. It's going to need to be completed, initialed, and signed. And now if you're doing this online, everything's, your online signatures, online initials, that's going to suffice, that requirement. So you don't need to print it out and sign it. The application through the SBA's portal, it's all going to flow into, one thing into the next. So the forms that you're required to fill out and sign, the system will should flow you right into the next form that you may need to fill out. Also, too, everybody will need to fill out a verification of tax information. So the IRS form 4506T, completed and signed by the applicant. Again, the application portal's online. It will flow right into that application. You're going to do it electronically, so there's no need to be printing it out and then sending it to the SBA. The electronic signatures will all take care of itself online. So then you'll need to provide supporting documentation. So it's all going to depend, on the calculation that you had to use, and different supporting documentation based on, say, you needed that calculation 3. You might need to provide, eligible expenses and different invoices and things like that. So some folks may have to provide more documentation than others. But some of the things you'll need is your business tax return. So you'll definitely need, if you fall into a category where your calculation is based on your 2019 your 2019 gross receipts, you will need to supply a copy of your 2019 federal tax returns. And we need the full federal tax returns with whatever schedules go with it, not just the first page. Also, too, you're going to need bank statements. So the SBA is looking for your 3 most recent bank statements, and they're not doing that to check to see, how much funds you have in your account, if it's your operating account, and do you really need these funds? That's not what the SBA is looking to do with that information. What they're doing is they're trying to uphold the integrity, of the program. They want to make sure and ensure that they're because this is taxpayer money, keep in mind that they are supplying these funds to the proper business entity, that is actually applying. So they want to make sure that, it's an account that you actively use for business. It's not going to some, personal account, and they notice that if there's no business activity, going out of that account, or it doesn't even match up with what the entity, that is applying. So they're just trying to uphold the integrity of the program itself. And then you also may need to provide externally or internally prepared financial statements, such as income statements or P&L statements. And then again, some other pieces of documentation is your point of sale reports. Keep in mind, even though Toast and Square are the only 2 vendors, third-party vendors that are accepting applications on their clients' behalfs, a variety of other point of sale vendors such as Clover, NCR, and a few others. They are actively helping their small business clients with getting any supporting documentation that's necessary on their end. So connect with them if you connect with your point of sale vendor to get your point of sale reports if that's something that you're going to need. So how do you get help applying? So like I discussed earlier, you can call that center hotline. Also, too, depending on what state you're in, every state has an SBA district office. Some have a few district offices. It just depends on how large the state is. So you can certainly connect with your local district office. They cannot help you with the application over the phone, and actually do it with you. We don't have access at the district office level. We don't have access to the portal. So like if you need to make a correction to your application, we do not, again, have access to the RRF application portal. So that we can't help on that end of things. But if you have an eligibility question, if we don't know the answer, we can certainly bring it up to our chain of command and try to get that answer as quick as possible for you. Maybe you have a technical issue. Again, we can try to bring that up to our chain of command and get an answer that will help you, finish the application process. And then also, too, keep in mind the RRF has its own informational landing page on SBA.gov. You can actually convert that information into a variety of different languages. I think we have upwards of 30 different languages listed on there. So, if you just scroll down to the bottom, you can select a language that suits your needs, and it should convert all of the information on there over to that. Also, to that hotline, you should be able to ask to speak to someone, or be prompted to, get assistance in a variety of different languages as well. So, a couple of things when it comes to the application itself, you'll notice, and if you're, I'm sure a lot of folks listening in, probably at this point have filled out some form of grant application or loan information that had to do with, COVID-19 small business relief at some point over the last year. You probably noticed that you've had to certify a variety of different things within that application. So again, with this program, you're going to need to certify that that the current economic uncertainty makes the funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. So that's very similar to the majority of our COVID-19 relief programs. All right, so then we're going to just touch on some best practices. So providing complete documentation is key. When it comes to doing your application online, like I said, that the district offices cannot help make any correction or error adjustments to your application. So just be careful when you are filling out your application that you fully understand that you're submitting the correct information into each category. If you are unsure, you can save your application and try to get assistance before you submit something that's incorrect, because it will delay the process if you have to try to make any sort of correction on your application. Also, too, very important, documentation, the supporting documentation that's needed, make sure you supply everything. Like I said with the tax returns earlier, they want to see your full federal tax returns. If like for 2019, for instance, they do not want it just the first page. So make sure you provide them, as much documentation as possible. If you need to provide eligible expense documentation, just sending an Excel spreadsheet with random, figures, that's not something that they're going to consider. A reviewer can't identify if that's eligible or not. So if you have like payroll and you're just punching in names and a few numbers on an Excel spreadsheet, that's not considered supporting documentation. You want to have sufficient documentation, whether it's, tax information or other, forms of legal documentation for that particular eligible expense. Then also too, you want to leverage your resources. So, if you have a access to a CPA or a business advisor or an accountant that can help you, put together, some of these forms, make sure you leverage those resources and try to get assistance in that manner. And then again, make sure the information is correct. Very important. Double check how you enter your business tax ID and your own personal information. Just scroll through it before you hit that submit button. If you intend on applying for the PPP, but like I said, it's very limited at this point because there's only a few lenders that can actually accept applications. You want to make sure you complete that application before the application for the RRF. And again, if you need any corrections that need to be made to your application after you hit submit, make sure you call that center hotline 844-279-8898 so that they can help make those corrections for you because they have access to the portal. So now we're going to go on to the use of funds and how you can utilize them. So I just want a reminder when it comes to this. When I was talking about the calculation for folks that fall into that calculation 3 category because they started their operations late, within the last year basically, or maybe haven't gotten their doors open yet, the eligible expenses that you can use for that particular calculation are going to fall into these same categories here. So let me pull them all up for you. So as far as business expenses go, so you have your payroll costs, you can utilize that. So, one thing when it comes to this program, there's not going to be any to compare to the Paycheck Protection Program. There's not going to be any percentage breakdown of how you use these funds. It's the SBA is just going to make sure that, okay, you utilize the funds for eligible expenses, and that's it. They're not going to look like the Paycheck Protection Program. You need to use at least 60% to be fully forgiven for payroll purposes. With this program, it's just as long as they're eligible expenses, you're fine. You can also use them for utility payments. You have your maintenance expenses, supplies or supplier costs, food and beverage expenses, construction of outdoor seating, payments on any business mortgage obligation or debt. Just keep in mind that the funds cannot be used for prepayments of principal and interest for mortgage debt or small business debt. Also, too, business operating expenses. So maybe you have insurance expenses, marketing fees, and other general fees, licensing fees, legal fees, your point of sale equipment. All of that can be used under this particular program. And then when do you have to utilize the fund? So I know I touched on that at the beginning of the presentation, but the funds, you can actually go back to February 15th of 2020 as well. So you have up until March 11th of 2023, but you can also spend on expenses that were incurred all the way going back to February 15th of 2020. So maybe you have back rent. That's fine. You can utilize these funds for that. Make sure, though, if a business permanently closes after receiving funds, the covered period will end when the business permanently closes or on March 11th, 2023, whichever occurs sooner. So, if, worst case scenario, your business ends up, shutting down permanently, even after receiving the funds, you will need to, send whatever funds were not used back to the government. Yeah, so any funds not spent on eligible expenses by the time the covered period ends must be returned to the government. The SBA will come up with an actual, probably some guidance on that, probably within maybe the next few months for folks, once they've gotten their awards and stuff. So they let them know that, by the time March 2023 rolls around, they'll understand that if they weren't able to utilize those funds, where to send them back. But I'm sure most folks will figure out ways to maximize the use of funds. So just some additional information when it comes to the use of funds. There's going to be a use of funds assessment. So after the total awarded funds have been exhausted, you must provide a detailed expense report and certification for the required period. Until you complete the use of funds assessment, beginning in December of 2021, you are required to provide self-reported, unaudited data detailing the use of distributed funds each year through 2023. So, again, the SBA is just looking to make sure that we're upholding the integrity of the program, and that folks are using the funds appropriately. We're not looking for a percentage breakdown, and there's going to be some sort of forgiveness process. That's not what this program dictates. However, they want to just make sure that they can tell the general tax-paying public that the funds are being used appropriately across the board. So again, we'll provide additional guidance on those requirements in the coming weeks. So additionally, there's some important contact information. So as far as where you want to get your information for this particular program, go to that www.sba.gov/restaurants. That is the landing page for the RRF program. You'll find the program guide on there. You'll find the sample application. I think they even put screenshots of the flow of the online portal application as well on there now. And they've also provided an extensive FAQ section that they've been updating hourly. So what they've been doing, is a variety of the common questions that are coming in nationwide through the district offices, obviously from the small businesses. They've been posting those in the FAQs, both on the technical side, so for application issues online, and both on the eligibility side. So I would highly suggest reading through those, because it does really provide a ton of great answers for different eligibility concerns. Um, also to, reach out to your local SBA office and other resource partners that we may partner with, whether that's SCORE or, the SBDC, things like that. And we also work heavily with folks at Interrise. So, if you have any questions, they can always connect, be that go between and get us some questions over, and we can try to get those answers for you. So that's we're all one big community that's trying to help out small businesses nationwide, and so we all are committed to doing that. And then, additional, relief programs, you want to go to the SBA's site. So any type of federal government relief programs that fall under the SBA, whether it's the EIDL program that still has their application open, and that should last until the end of this year, or the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program, all of that can be found on SBA.gov. And then, yeah, just, there's a variety of different ways to stay connected to the SBA. I know there's folks from different parts of the country on the call. So again, connect with your local SBA district office. Every one of them have their own website and landing page themselves, where they also provide things like the monthly calendars with a variety of different trainings that are happening with, a variety of different resource partners as well. So, I highly suggest checking that out. They also have all the different connection tools for the local lending partners in your area, and information that pertains to their particular state. And that is the end of the presentation, and we can definitely open it up for questions. I'll just take down the presentation here so I can see the full screen.
Thank you, Dan. We do have one question in the chat. So as a business broker with COVID-affected restaurants listed for sale, I'd like to know how the sale of a restaurant would affect the RRF program.
So if the business is in the process for the sales, typically, from what I've heard, they're gonna have to make the judgment, like, because they can only utilize it for their operation, by the time they're open. If they do sell it, we haven't gotten a clear indication on if those funds can be transferred to the new business ownership. That still hasn't been, answered. I would probably suggest, if they are, looking to sell, they may want to, refrain from applying if that's their true intention, to sell within a very short period of time. Because yeah, they're more than likely they'll need to send back the funds, because when they applied under that particular entity, that particular EIN, and there's other things that factor into that too, which is like the paycheck protection funds that influence that grant. So there's other things that could become an issue for that particular situation. So if their intention is to sell in the very near future, they may want to hold off on applying.
All right, gotcha. So that was the only question I got. We do have a few more minutes if there's any more questions. You're welcome. Great. So if there's no more questions, I'll send out this recording after the session, and Dan also included a lot of helpful links that I'll send out as well. But
yeah, the program guide
so
definitely. Yeah, the program guide definitely. I would highly suggest everybody just going on that link particular, because the definitions of on-site sales, gross receipts, when you started your operations, all listed in the ending pages of that. So everybody has a clear indication of how they should do their calculation based on the different definitions there. But yeah, like I said, anytime people have questions after, feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure Jess can send my contact information out, and I'll be happy to help if I can.
Awesome, sounds good. All right, thank you everyone for joining. Dan. Thank you as always.
All
Great
righty.
information.
Thanks for having me. Thank you,
Have a
Enterprise.
yeah. Have
Have
a
a good
great
day,
rest of your
everybody.
weekend.